Nazis. There was also huge stadiums in Madison Square Garden where they had full-on Nazi rallies that were filled to capacity.
Crazy.
There was a lot of very powerful individuals that were bankrolling them, financing them. Many powerful corporations, corporations like Coca-Cola, IBM, and of course, a lot of the bigger influence from Hitler came from a lot of the eugenics Rockefeller-funded medical studies and boards that, of course, he paid for and financed, that essentially created the theory that Hitler was going on with his larger genocide and eugenics program.
Look at this. Look at this. These photos. This is from NPR. This is crazy stuff.
Yeah, that's Madison Square Garden.
In Madison Square Garden, Nazi rally in, was it 1939?
Yeah, Henry Ford was also another big supporter.
When did World War II start?
1939.
Right. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, all the banks were like, wait, we got to stop. We can't support this.
In 1938, Hitler was Time Person of the Year.
Yeah, he was on Time Magazine. And Time Magazine was run by Henry Luce, who was Skull and Bones.
I went to an antique store, a couple of them, in West Virginia, because there's tons. People love antiquing out here. And I was able to buy hundreds of Life magazine going all the way back. I think I have the first issue, actually, which was like a couple $100. I was really excited to get it. And we're going to be putting at the new studio like a viewing library where you can go back and read all of the contextual perspectives. It is crazy to read about World War II before they knew what was going on. Nuts. In one of the magazines, they're like, the U.S. sent defensive machinery and equipment to the UK to prevent an invasion. And it basically shows the armaments for D-Day. Like, we now know the U.S. was sending weapons so they could storm the beaches of Normandy. Back then, it was reported that they were just defending the UK.
Oh, you mean the news was lying to people for military gain? Really?
Well, I mean, look, I don't expect them to be like, we're going to invade.
Yeah, of course,
you know what I mean?
The whole thing was a subterfuge played on the Germans, essentially, so they didn't know when they were coming or where they were coming from.
It really is. These magazines are incredible. To like read history in the perspective of the day with no foreknowledge, having the gift of hindsight to read like, it's just a crazy thing to read a journalist be so wrong about everything.
It's part of why we need to preserve our data and why censorship is dangerous and why we need like external sources of data collection, because we need like our data should be in orbit in glass in case a meteor annihilates the surface so that we can see what the mistakes we made along the way and all the things like what you're talking about, how we manipulated our enemies in the past, how they can be manipulating us right now. Mm-hmm. Do you think that when the Soviet Union was falling apart with this concerted effort to make the Russians and the Austrian-Hungarian Empire disappear, because I think when they split up the Soviet Union, the oligarchs or whoever split it up gave the Black Sea to Ukraine. They took it away from Russia. They didn't want them to have Mediterranean access. So you think that was intentional?
Oh, absolutely. That's a classic strategic area, Ukraine is, right? So Hitler had that as a really important area when he was trying to, go against Russia. But the Cold War, in my view, was a managed dialectic. Ultimately, I'm not saying it didn't. I mean, my uncle was like a Air Force guy in the Cold War, so I'm not saying that people didn't do stuff, but at a higher level, these are the people who wanted there to be a dialectic between Eastern capital or Western capitalism and Eastern Soviet bloc communism to smash the two together. And what you get out of that is what's called a third way synthesis. And even back in the day, in like the 30s, Bertrand Russell was writing in Scientific Outlook as a high level elite planner at the Royal Society. He was writing and saying that he says, quote, "The experiment in Russia under Stalin is going great." And you'll find them talking about, David Rockefeller talks about Mao's, experiment. These are experiments, I think, of technologies of governance. They want to see how they work. I think Nazism was the same thing. And so they find what works well in what regions. That's why the West is still promoting, Azov Battalion and that stuff in Ukraine now, right? I thought we were supposed to be against Nazis, right? America, right? But in the Ukraine, it's cool. I mean, it makes no sense, right? But it makes sense from a geopolitical strategic standpoint. So absolutely, like the point was to deplete, destroy Russia, ultimately for integrating everything into a technocratic order. That was the plan 100 years ago, what we're seeing now. So, yeah.
I guess it sounds like it was the plan 2,000 years ago with Plato, or at least he was giving the philosophy. The plan hadn't.
Yeah, I think Plato thought that you could have a city state. But I don't know if he thought like the whole world would conform to this. Maybe he thought that. I think later Platonists, like in the Middle Ages, thought we could take that model and it actually should be the whole world. I mean, you even see this in Enlightenment philosophers, like Kant has a whole thing about how to create a world government. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So where are we going? I guess my question for you is, with all this talk about the World Economic Forum, everything they're talking about doing. They want to ban free speech. Based on everything you've read, where do you think the next steps are? Where are they going to try and bring us?
So a lot of these books do talk about 10, 20, 30-year actuary plans. So the next 10 years is to get in things like the CBDC. It's to get in things like universal basic income if people accept it. We had, Klaus, and they were running cyber polygon. And they were just recently talking about large scale internet cyber outages. I mean, when they run a lot of these drills, not always, but a lot of times the drills, kind of presage what's going to come. So I would say in the next 10 years, we could expect that kind of stuff.
They're talking about like a cyber 9/11.
Yeah.
Some great catastrophe. What is that going to look like? You think freezing out bank accounts? We saw with the airlines.
Yeah.
They're saying some guy deleted some files on accident, but then we saw the Bank of America thing where people's money started disappearing. They said, "Oh, it was a glitch." If we actually got some cyber shutdown, I remember there was this big thing in the hacker community people were telling me about. I'm not an expert. Many of you listening maybe know. It's called DNS cache poisoning. You guys might know about that. Apparently, there was this big thing that happened where domain name servers, the directory for the internet had some kind of exploit. And a small group convened all the great powers of the internet and said, "Hey guys, if anyone finds out about this, if this gets out, internet gets shut down." And so they secretly worked behind the scenes, fixed the problem, and then came out and said, "You guys had no idea how close you were to the entirety of the internet going down." If something like that were to happen, our economy would be overnight. Yeah. I mean, you go to these small cafes and everything's digital. You go to Starbucks, it's like, who uses cash? But if the internet goes down, you're not doing transactions with a credit card. Credit card will be a piece of plastic. Nothing. Yeah. No way to transact any of this stuff. I mean, I think that's a possibility for what they may be talking about.
That's the problem. What's going to be the reaction? What's going to be the solution? I think that's the important thing to really kind of look at here. We were talking about what's happening with Bank of America, the FAA, the Canadian FAA. A lot of people are kind of speculating that there's a big possibility that these are ransom attacks. It's also important to note here that a lot of these ransom attacks are directly because, and I believe Edward Snowden said this a couple of years ago, was that the CIA and the NSA built specific toolkits. They built specific online weapons that could hack a lot of online websites, a lot of important key pieces of infrastructure. Those toolkits were just allegedly stolen, and now any hacker could get access to them. Was this done deliberately? Was this something done that was just a part of a larger plan here? Was this an accident? Was this done on purpose? I think those are questions that people should be asking themselves, since these larger ransom attacks that were in the news a couple months ago, especially affecting American oil supply in the southeast of the United States. We paid for these tools kits that are being used right now for these ransom attacks. People need to understand that what's happening here was directly a responsibility of some of the biggest agencies in Washington, D.C.
When were these toolkits taken?
I gotta look it up just to give you a concise answer about this, but I believe Edward Snowden did a big expose on all of this.
You could definitely call it a form of theft, but it's more, keep in mind that they copied those tool sets, so now there's multiple copies of them floating around.
It's all out there.
Future sounds fun and exciting.
I don't even know.
I recommend getting out of cities, buying chickens, maybe some goats.
Like some people say, there won't even be humans in 100 years.
Like
They'll all be AI at that point. I don't know if that's.
I did a segment talking about how we will not be able, like, if population collapses, all of the luxuries will be gone. Like, let me ask you a question: How does that TV up there work? Do you know? Can anybody give me a fundamental explanation?
Man, I can look at a computer processing board, but I have no idea what copper gets soldered where and gets twisted onto the.
Here's what I know: the TV, that's an LED light emitting diode. They're lined up. They emit colors. I got no idea how you create a graphical user interface. If the population collapsed, so would we. There are people who probably know how to make a screen, who know how to make glass, who know how to make a circuit board, that don't know how to make a TV, because it's all of the different companies coming together.
That's the problem with these replaceable parts factories in general, is that people don't know the entire process anymore. The artisanal labor of workshops is gone now. We have factories.
That's a function of reality. No one person can know how to make a toaster. Now, here's what I did say, and these leftists tried mocking me for it. We do have layman understanding of certain things, which will benefit us in rebuilding if population collapsed. Like I don't know how to smelt or anything like that, or mine ore, or make iron. I couldn't make you a cast iron skillet, but I do know general things. I was shown by a geologist iron-rich ore deposits, iron-rich mud, and where iron comes from. And I have a basic understanding of melting things down because we got a crucible and a kiln and all that stuff, and we've melted down metals before. But if I were to try, I'll put it this way. If the society collapsed, me here and all this luxury, all this stuff, it would take me years to figure out how to make a piece of metal. Years. Now that's better off than a tribal, caveman or whatever. Took them generations. So there is that benefit, but people don't understand how much you will lose if the grid goes down.